I like to start, whenever I do this talk, I like to give people the opportunity to showcase how miserable their life is. So what I'd like to do, I know we have a smaller group of folks here, but if you are if you're a .NET developer today that has to maintain a .NET Framework application, raise your hand. And now, keep it up, keep them up, keep them up. So I'm going to start at like the highest number, like the current version. I'm going to start working my way down. And if you have your hand raised after a particular time, I have 2 T-shirts for 2 lucky, lucky, lucky folks. So 4.8, 4.7, 4.6, 4.5.2, 4.5, 4.0. Is your hand raised in the back? Yeah. All right. So what version are you on?
Technically, I'm still using Compact Framework.
That doesn't count. .NET Framework.
Compact Framework doesn't count.
Sweet. Well, at the end, you, sir, and you, sir, in the back, I have a lovely F# T-shirt. And if you're nostalgia about something that happened a long time ago, I have a VB shirt as well. So you both can choose. And I also have some stickers up here for the rest of you. All right, so with that, my name is Isaac Levin. I am a .NET developer advocate for AWS. And today we're going to talk about what do I do with my old, and in some cases very, very old, .NET Framework applications. So at the end of this talk, there will be a short link with all sorts of cool resources to this deck for other documentation on migrations and things like that. And we're also going to take a look at some tools that we can use to effectively help in the process. So with that, might be a good idea to talk about where we are today. So who here today is pretty up to speed with .NET in its current infancy? Ish? OK. You've heard of .NET 6, though. You've seen some great talks about, hey, these are the things that .NET developers have all this access to. But if you're in the unfortunate situation where you're not using .NET 6 or even .NET Core, which it's the artist formerly known as, you might have some questions. So what exactly is .NET 6? So .NET 6, to be very, very blunt and to summarize it at a high level, it's .NET that can run anywhere, side by side, on all sorts of different devices. Right? So what does that actually mean? It means it's a cross-platform, that's when you say runs anywhere, native UI and web UI framework that has hooks for strong performance, better, I guess you could say, productivity, as well as all sorts of features that you've probably seen throughout DevReach for the last couple of days. So, and one of the things that's really, really important to call out is that this has been a journey. And I think it might be valuable for us to talk about what that journey actually is. So everybody here probably is familiar with our friend on the top, .NET Framework being the thing that's 20+ years old, the thing that we have built our careers on, been going on. Still a lot of great work is done using .NET Framework. Over the last few years, you've probably seen .NET Core more and more. .NET Core being a cross-platform implementation of .NET that was built by the .NET team at Microsoft. And then some of you also, especially if you use Telerik controls, you might be familiar with Mono/Xamarin. Mono being the runtime that was built by a community outside of Microsoft to create a non-Windows dependent version of .NET. Because as we all know, this top one right here runs only on Windows. So at a particular point in time, you have these 3 .NETs, right? And as one could imagine, when you have 3 .NETs, choosing which .NET to use might be challenging. So let's just merge them all together and call that .NET. And that's my entire talk. But in all seriousness, the things that I talked about, it's building that entire 20-year history of .NET into something that we have today. That doesn't mean that you can take a .NET Framework app today and just make it .NET 6. Life wouldn't be that easy. But we can take the building blocks that we've built over the course of our lifetimes as developers to build something that's really, really great and brings value to our customers. But what does it really mean? In the all-encompassing, yes. The folks that raise their hand, you have have experience using older, different versions of .NET Framework, right? 4.8.2 being the most recent. If you're using .NET Framework 4.8 today, I want to assure you, more than likely, it's okay. More than likely, you will have support for the rest of eternity. And why would you think that is? Anybody? It's built into Windows. Thank you, my friend. So .NET Framework 4.8.2 ships in Windows. And as long as there's a Windows, which hopefully, based on my stock, is forever, right? So if you're on the latest 4.8 version of Windows, you can rest assured that you're going to have some form of support. But if you're on a version older than that, I highly, highly recommend looking at opportunities to get there. And I know it's not as simple as just, hey, just change the target framework and you're good to go. When we talk about .NET Core specifically, it went through these different versions. The first version of .NET Core, I can't remember, 6 years ago, 5 years ago. And then .NET Core 2, and then .NET Core 2.2, and 3, and 3.1, which is now the current LTS, LTS being long-term support, which coincidentally enough finishes up this year. And then you have this thing down at the bottom. Mono runtime, again, built by an entity outside of Microsoft to provide a non-Windows version of .NET. That company was then acquired by Microsoft. So Microsoft owns these 3 .NETs. So what do you think is the best thing that they should do? Well, let's take .NET Core and a lot of the great work that's been done in the mono runtime and merge it in and create .NET Core 4.0. Why is that a terrible idea? Because there's already a .NET Framework 4.0. And last time I checked, whenever you search for things on the internet, it's not going to say, oh, this is the newest blog post in this particular thing, or this is the newest piece of documentation. So they realized very, very quickly naming something .NET whatever 4 was going to cause a lot of disruption for customers that are currently using .NET Framework 4. So they just decided to do the smartest thing possible and just change the version up one and then take off the core nomenclature. So going forward, .NET is a number, or .NET and then a number. So right now we're on .NET 6, which came out in November of 2022. There's going to be a new .NET coming out every November, hopefully for the foreseeable future or for some amount of time. .NET 7 will come out this November, and then .NET 8, and then .NET 9, and then .NET Strawberry Shortcake or whatever. But what does that actually mean as it pertains to the apps that we build? Every even number of .NET will have long-term support for 3 years. So if you're on .NET 6 today, it was shipped in November 2021 using fast math that I'm really, really good at. You will have support until the end of 2024. If you're on .NET 5, your support options no longer need to be looked at because .NET 6 is the LTS version, .NET 7 is not going to be an LTS version, and .NET 8 will be. So that gets us to .NET 6. Does that make sense? History lesson? Yes.
What is the TLS?
LTS? LTS stands for long-term support. Yeah, so basically how Microsoft support works is that for .NET, you have 3 years of support when the LTS version of one of their software comes out. So for instance, .NET 6, which is an LTS version of .NET, came out in November of 2021. Add 3 years to 2021, you have 2024. So the end of 2024 is when you will no longer have support with .NET 6. But by that point in time, there'll be a few versions of .NET that have came out since then because there's a promise that it'll come out every November, every year, probably in the November timeframe. So theoretically, by 2024, we'll be on .NET 9, right? And then there'll already be a .NET 8, which will have an LTS of 3+ years from wherever that comes out. Is that helpful? Cool, awesome. Any questions about that? There's people in the back that are like, this is not accurate at all. What is he talking about? So the first question that you probably are thinking is, I'm a .NET Framework developer. You talked a little bit about .NET 6. You talked about why it's so important and the history and all that sort of stuff. But what is actually not in .NET 6? The stuff that you see here are probably things that you're familiar with if somebody who's built .NET apps for the last 15, 20 years, right? Most notably, web forms and WCF. The reason why these particular component types or models are not coming over is probably for a handful of reasons. One, they make use of some technology paradigms that probably aren't accurate in how we build applications today. And two, they might have deep-rooted ties to something that is tied to Windows. So there are suitable replacements if you have a particular preference as it pertains to how you build apps. Most notably, if you're using web forms today, you can take a look at ASP.NET Blazor, ASP.NET Core Blazor. There's been at least 400 talks at DevReach about Blazor because reasons. And I think Blazor is a great option for you, especially if you're building new web applications. If you're building WCF today, which, when I came out of college, WCF was like the thing. It was going to be the greatest way to build web APIs of all time. And then a few years later, Web API came out, and then that was the best approach for REST services, right? WCF has an open source community port called WCF Core, or Core WCF. It is not officially maintained by the .NET team or Microsoft in general, but there are people who work at Microsoft and are strong contributors to the .NET ecosystem that contribute to Core WCF. So it might be a viable option as it pertains to migration story. The official, quote-unquote, replacement is gRPC, which is a remote procedure call process to allow you to communicate in a similar way to WCF. And there's been talks, and there are talks, and there's great content about gRPC specifically with .NET. One thing that's really important to call out as well when we talk about going from .NET Framework to the quote-unquote the new .NET, .NET Core, into .NET 5, and now .NET 6, and then .NET 7, is that there are a couple of things that have changed substantially for the better, in my opinion. And one of those being how we target frameworks or target different platforms with .NET. If anybody has looked at a CS project file for .NET Framework, it's like 90 lines, and you have no idea what's in most of it. In the new world of .NET, the project file is more condensed and it's more clear as to what the purpose is. And we'll take a look at what I mean by that in a second. But the most important thing to call out is that how you target particular versions of .NET is a bit different too. So today, if you're building an application for .NET 6 and you go to Visual Studio or Writer or whatever and you go File New .NET Application, and you open up the CS project file, which you can actually do in Visual Studio, you can't do it with .NET Framework, you'll see something like this, Net 6.0. And that's the target framework for .NET 6. And what it is it combines all of the APIs and specific implementation of .NET Core, which the framework name for that is .NET Core App, and .NET Standard, which is .NET Standard. We'll talk about .NET Standard specifically in a second. So when you build these projects, you say, OK, Net 6.0. And then you have the ability to add additional configuration after that. So for instance, if I want to run an app that runs on Windows, it's Net 6.0-Windows, or Android or iOS, if that's where your heart desires. And that's called a TFM, or a Target Framework Moniker. And what it does is it provides specific OS functionality to .NET 6. So it's kind of like an add-on. Think of it as like an add-on. So when we're building these things, this is the framework to follow. Down here in the purple, like I mentioned earlier, it has everything here. People that are watching the stream can't see me circling, but I'm going to circle in the bottom right area of the page. So net x.y being the major version and then the minor release of that. And that includes everything in the latest versions of .NET Core and .NET Standard, which are 3.1 and 2.1 respectively. And then everything that's orange or brownish on this top level are those additional monikers that I was talking about that you can add. And it doesn't just stop at Android or iOS. You can have Tizen, for instance, if you have a Samsung TV that's been built in the last few years, you can run .NET on those TVs. which I think is kind of cool, or watches, or Raspberry Pis, or all sorts of different things. So the question then becomes, when I'm looking to take advantage of libraries or packages that Microsoft has provided, what do they target? And it is as plain as going forward, it's going to be Net 6.0 or Net 7.0 or what have you. Especially if you're consuming libraries that are based off of ASP.NET Core or Entity Framework, everything that's under the system.namespace, system.link or system.collections.generic or so on and so forth. If you need to take advantage of Windows-specific functionality, it's -Windows. If you need to take advantage of cross-platform abstractions, like if you're taking advantage of some of the components from Xamarin or potentially Maui, which there's been a lot of content from this particular conference about. That's going to be Net 6 with that specific OS moniker at the end of it. And then finally, if you have a dependency or you're building a dependency that needs to be consumed by a .NET Framework project, target .NET Standard. But what should you target when you're building apps, right? Or building projects in general? If today you need to build, like I mentioned, like for instance, you have a .NET Framework 4.8 web forms application, and you also have a .NET 6 application, and you want to be able to share code between the two. So .NET Standard allows you to do that. So .NET Standard is a contract of sorts that provides an API surface that provides functionality across different versions of .NET. And basically how it works is the higher number you go for .NET Standard, there's a 1.0 and a 1.6 and a 2.0 and a 2.1 and probably some other versions as well. The higher the version number, the more APIs that you have access to develop. But the higher the number, the less platforms that officially supports. So for instance, if you need to be able to target Windows 8 or something with UWP or whatever, your version of .NET Standard will probably be lower. But if you're taking advantage of 4.8.2, like I said, you might be able to, you more than likely will use .NET Standard 2.0. If you're doing some things with Mono and Xamarin and .NET Core, you might want to look at .NET Standard 2.1 because there's some valuable things in there. But if you're only building applications that are used, or projects that are used for .NET 6, .NET 6 is a way to go for code sharing. Right? Does that all make sense? Pretty clear-ish? So what is a typical workflow? Isaac, the name of your talk is What Do I Do with My Applications? And you spent like the last 15, 20 minutes giving me a history lesson. This isn't what I signed up for. I'm surprised that I'm still here. But let's talk about what we actually need to do to go from, hey, I have some .NET Framework application to .NET 6 or some .NET in the future. And I see it as a four-step approach. Those steps being of it depends length. And it depends is how big your projects are. So that first step is doing a calculated assessment of what your project is, what are some of the dependencies that it consumes, what are some of the framework APIs that you're making reference to, just to basically provide an inventory of the impact that you'll need to, the impact of making this change will actually go through. And there are some really valuable tools for that. There's the .NET Upgrade Assistant, which is a command line-based tool from Microsoft. There's also a tool called the Porting Assistant for .NET from AWS that is a graphical tool and an extension-based tool in Visual Studio that allows you to get some of this really, really rich information. And I'll do a quick demo of those at the end. After you've done that preparation step, which can take time, let's be 100% honest. You could run into a situation where just gathering all that information and figuring out what you're going to do could take weeks, months. And then the next step is you can upgrade. These tools that I mentioned here, they also give you an option to port or migrate as well. Your mileage may vary, obviously, because more than likely you run that command and your app's not going to build. But it'll do a lot of that low-level, hanging fruit, automated type tasks. So once you've done that, and you've done that upgrade in a different branch, hopefully, because we don't want to block anybody from doing additional work, we can actually go into the IDE or editor of our choice and start to build and make changes and get our code to a point where it actually is functional. And once we've got that step 3 and our code builds locally, maybe we've done a couple of test runs on in our local environment, we continue to go through that run and test iteration cycle. If you have test projects, make sure your test projects are .NET 6 as well. And maybe have the opportunity to deploy to a low-level environment so you can do user acceptance testing or smoke testing or whatever your existing test practice is. So this is a really, really high level of what you should do. I'm not saying that this is going to get you from point A to point B as fast as possible, but it builds a framework for you to actually go down this path. And when I've talked to people, whether you have 1 or 2 projects or you have 70 projects in a solution, this approach will still work. Obviously, the length is a bit different. The question then becomes, okay, like in that upgrade step or that 2 or 3 step, what do I actually rewrite versus what do I actually reuse? So if I'm building an application and I'm trying to get it from .NET Framework to .NET 6, there's a lot of code that I can just reuse because of .NET Standard. If you have business logic that exists today that is, your for loops or link statements or data access or whatever, more than likely, that code can just get reused. You move that code into a class library, and you get to a point where the only code that's in your web projects is code that you cannot migrate. So for instance, if you're using ASP.NET MVC, like there is a port, you can go to MVC in .NET Core or .NET 6. So you have that ability. The things that you don't have the ability to just migrate are things that you'll have to rewrite. So global ASAX or specific routing or configuration with MVC. If you take advantage of bundling or minification, more than likely you're not going to be able to do that. And then if you're using some of the technologies that we mentioned earlier, like WCF or ASP.NET Web Forms, you'll need to look to rewrite. But if, for instance, if you're building an MVC application today, your migration story or modernization story from .NET Framework to .NET 6 isn't as challenging as it could be if you were using Web Forms or something of the sort, right? So it really just depends on what your use case is and how much of the stuff in the rewrite column you actually have to rewrite. And one of the things that I love to use an example of is if you just compartmentalize areas of functionality, right? Move it over to a class library, make sure that it works, point your application to it, and continue through that those iteration steps until you get to a place where, hey, you have like an app that basically is .NET 6, right? I know it's not as simple as that, but I've had enough conversations with customers that if you're methodical about it, it's substantially less painful than what you probably think it is. We'll talk a little bit about tools. So the porting assistant for .NET from AWS, and I'll show a demo of this, and I'll show a demo of the upgrade assistant as well. It's a standalone tool, which means that it's a graphical user interface. It runs as an actual application on Windows. And there's also a 2019 and 2022 extension. The code is available for free on GitHub. There is no cost. You do not need to pay AWS money to use this tool. It supports .NET 3.5 all the way up to .NET 6. You can also use it to port your applications to .NET Core 3.1 as well. It has support for MVC and class libraries. It also does some preliminary things. If you're on Web Forms, it'll attempt to port it to Blazor for you. And if you're using WCF, it'll look to port your application to WCF Core. So even though WCF Core isn't officially supported, AWS believes that there's been enough community adoption from Core to WCF to make it a viable option for folks. And there are a ton of interesting things that I would love for you folks to follow around with. So there'll be a link again at the end to follow and see what we're doing that are trying to just make this modernization story a bit more approachable for folks. So I want to show a demo of some stuff. And while I'm setting this up, if you have any questions or whatever, I'm going to sit down and we can take an opportunity to chat more about your particular use case or whatever. But I'm going to show a demo really quick of that. But if you have any questions, feel free to just jump out and interrupt me. All right, so let's start off with the .NET Upgrade Assistant that this no longer is. Okay. Let's go duplicate. Cool. All right, that was terrifying for a second. So I have a .NET Framework application. That .NET Framework application is a simple matching game. You've probably seen a demo similar to this before. It's a WinForms application in .NET Framework 4.5. And I want to be able to take this application, and I want to be able to port it to .NET 6 using the .NET Upgrade Assistant. .NET Upgrade Assistant, like I mentioned earlier, it is a CLI-based command. So I'm inside of my Microsoft terminal. I can take a look here, and as you can see, it's a simple solution with 2 projects. Yes? You can't see? Is it too small? Or is it too dark? Oh, okay. Yeah, let me do this. Let me change this. Let me change the. Yeah, maybe if I make it white, if I make the console white, would that you be able to see it a bit better? You think? That's better. Were you able to see the slides at all? The slides were good? Okay. All right, because I'll do the whole talk again if you need me to do the slides. Everybody can see this? Ed, in the back. Cool. Thank you, sir. All right, so I am in Windows Terminal. I'm glad that you can see it. Thank you so much for letting me know. I was just going to look like an idiot showing a screen that nobody can see for a bit. So my solution has 2 projects, a WinForms project and a class library. So what I want to be able to do is I want to take advantage of the .NET Upgrade Assistant, again, which is a free tool. It's available on GitHub, provided by the .NET team at Microsoft, to port this application from .NET Framework 4.5, and I can show that just so nobody thinks that I'm lying. So, no, I don't zoom it on here. So 4.5, right? Everybody believe me that it says 4.5? There's no smoke and mirrors here. So I'm going to port this, and it's as simple as the Upgrade Assistant is a .NET CLI tool, which means that I run a command and install it locally to my machine. And how I use it is I go Upgrade Assistant, and then I point it at a solution file. And then what it's going to do, I need to actually specify the command that I want. Apologies. And that command is upgrade. And what this is going to do, let me zoom out just a little bit, just because it's a little bit more readable. So it'll actually walk you through step by step of what it's actually going to do. The first thing it says, okay, you pointed me at a solution, give me an entry point. That entry point being basically the place that it wants to start doing the upgrade. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to start stepping through this stuff. And then it asks what project do you want to go on to first. And I say the matching game, which is our WinForms application. Then it says, okay, select your project to upgrade. So we'll do that. It says that there's an entry point there. It says, oh, there's a dependency here on your WinForms project to this class library. So we should start there first. All right. So then it starts listing out steps that it's going to actually do. The first step is you want to back up your project. I don't back up projects because I live on the edge, so I'm just going to skip that. I highly recommend that you back up your project. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to convert your project file to that SDK style. So what I talked about earlier is that between .NET Framework and .NET 6, the project file looks substantially different. And it's going to actually port that. So after this runs, I'll actually open up Visual Studio Code here and show you what it did. So I can open up this. Let me just minimize this. Everything on the left-hand side is what it was. If you scroll down, 49 lines. Everything on the right-hand side, it is 11. So there's a lot going on here that is now no longer necessary. And it still says target framework net 45 because there's additional steps that we'll need to run. That if we continue through, the next thing that it's going to say is, hey, we're going to add some analyzers to that. And this is where I want to pause for a second. So how this works is there's a lot of conditions that need to be checked. Are you doing this? If you're doing this, you need to do this. So what the upgrade system actually does is it installs an analyzer into your project, which will analyze your project file, some of your source code, to basically determine, oh, this thing's not going to work in .NET 6. This thing's not going to work in .NET 6, and so on and so forth. So it's going to add those particular analyzers, and it does that a few times if you see on steps 3 and steps 5, for instance. So I'm going to do that. It adds that line. And then the next thing that it does, it adds some more, and then it says it's going to update the TFM. And if you remember from earlier, if you were paying attention, it's going to take the Net45 target framework and move it over to a different one that's going to work. And let's see what that actually is. So it's going to update the TFM here. It says updated TFM to .NET Standard 2.0. And the reason why it does .NET Standard is because it recognizes this is being called from a .NET Framework 4.5 application. So if I was to have this go to .NET 6 today, it would fail on a build. So go ahead there, hit enter. And then it does a lot of additional steps. And then it says move on to the next project. If we take a look at our project file now, as you can see, it now says .NET Standard 2.0. So if we go on to the next step, it's then going to say, let's move on to the next project. All right, so we'll do that. So our class library is completed. Now let's go on to our WinForms application. And it's going to go through that same process as earlier, right? So I'm going to fast forward through a couple of these steps. Oh, I accidentally backed up. I had failed miserably at life. So it's going to do that same thing. It's going to convert the project file to SDK. It's going to add those analyzers that I mentioned earlier. It's going to update the TFM. And then it's going to do some specific things to WinForms to make this application .NET 6 compatible. So let's just skip forward a few times. I'll be mindful of everybody's time instead of watching me just hit next a bunch. All right, so we're updating the TFM, and we'll pause after this one. All right. So as you can see here, there's a lot of stuff going on here now. But if I take a look at this, which is our WinForms application, as you can see, everything on the left-hand side is what it used to be. Line check, 89, now that's 19. The things that matter, especially for this particular scenario, is that the target framework now is .NET 6.0-Windows because, as you remember, you can add that dash moniker at the end for Windows. And then there's things like using WinForms or import desktop targets that allow additional hooks for the Microsoft.NET SDK to be able to run WinForms applications. So it's going to do some more analyzers. So it's going to check for Windows compatibility, which makes sure that you're building apps that are going to run the latest version of Windows. And we'll see what that actually means in a second. Apologize for this being slowish. This laptop is a choice, let's just say that. So one of the things that it wants you to do is it wants you to add default font APIs, and then it's going to upgrade some app config files, and then in step 9, it's actually going to upgrade source code. So we'll do that. It adds the WinForms source updater because it understands that it's going to need to update some of your source code. And we'll see what that source code changes actually looks like. You can do it. All right, update Windows Desktop project. And finally, slow. All right. While that is, dismiss. All right, so now we're complete with our migration of that particular instance. So as you see, it updates a bunch of files, right? If we look at our mainform CS, which is our kind of our primary entry point, so it created this, but we can actually go in and look at our program.cs and see some of the things that it actually changed at the program level. All it really did is it added some high DPI settings because in the newest version of Windows, you need to recognize high DPI. There are some additional things it added, and we can go over that if you'd like, but I want to move forward to it actually working. So let's actually finalize this. So move on to the next project. It finalized the upgrade. And now I think what's going to happen if I run .NET Run in here. What's going to happen? Do you think it's going to work or do you think it's going to fail? 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 You think it's going to work because I've done this demo before? So I run .NET Run inside the WinForms application, and there you go. This is a WinForms application for .NET 6 that I literally just ported from .NET Framework 4.5 using a command line utility. So pretty cool, right? Obviously, this is the silliest demo of all time, because no one actually runs their business on a card matching game. But it shows you that things are possible. And I want to show you one additional tool as well that, again, brings additional options for you. And that tool is the porting assistant for .NET from AWS. So before I go into this, who knew a tool like this existed? That's great feedback. That means that you didn't know about this and you could probably take advantage of it, right? So what the porting assistant for .NET is, in general, is a assessment and porting tool to get from .NET Framework to .NET 6. So when you open it, this is the standalone version of it. There's also a version that runs inside of the IDE, inside Visual Studio. But what you do is you can assess a new solution, and then it'll assess that solution and all the projects into it, and then give you some really, really valuable information that you can use for that preparation step that we were talking about a bit earlier. So I have a couple of projects in here, or solutions that I've already assessed. Who here has heard of NOP Commerce? Yeah? NOP Commerce, to summarize it, it's an open source e-commerce platform. So you can go out to GitHub today and take a look at it, and hey, I can use this particular project as inspiration to build an e-commerce site or an e-commerce system for my business if I had a retail type business. I like using it as an example because it's a decent sized solution. There's 30 some odd projects, 31. And when I actually assess this project, I'm given like a really, really nice assessment overview page. So it lists out all the projects that are in my solution, what their framework is, how many are referenced, and the incompatible packages and APIs and porting actions that will take place, right? Like just this view, like how valuable is this for somebody who's going from .NET Framework to .NET 6? Like somebody say, like, this is kind of cool. I'm expecting somebody to now say, this is kind of cool. Yeah, this is kind of cool, right? No, I'm sorry, like that was embarrassing for me, I'm so sorry. So, but if I go into a particular project, I can get even more information. So right here, I'm in the NOP web project, and what I can actually do is I can take a look at the references at the solution level for all of the projects in the solution. So as you can see here, like this is all the interconnectivity between all of the projects in my solution. So as you can see, I probably should not start my porting journey by porting the NOP core project. And why do you think that is? Dependencies. It's going to break every other project. So the thought is that maybe you port a project that has a little bit less surface, right? So, but this gives you a graphical view of all of the different projects and how they're dependent on each other. So pretty valuable stuff. And if I drill into a particular project, like the web project, for instance, it'll start listing out NuGet packages that it found in the CS project or the packages.json file, and it will start to show if they're incompatible or compatible with .NET 6. And if they are compatible, what the suggested replacement for them is. So again, if you don't have a tool like this, you got to do it all yourself. And that sometimes, depending on how big your project is, your solution is, sometimes it's a big deal, sometimes it can take a long time. I was getting there. I mean, it's okay. It's okay. Do you want to do my presentation? No, I'm just kidding. So same thing, it has that project reference graph, and then it has at the API level. So for instance, all of the source files that reference a particular API and whether that API is compatible or not. So I can take a look what source files are being used the most, right? So NOP, there's some models here, factories, what have you, and some of them are compatible and some of them are not. And then I can actually go in and look at individual source files, and it'll say, hey, here are some of the APIs that you're calling from this class file, and this is what you probably need to do. So let's just drill into one of them. So let's look at this boards controller, for instance. So it'll start to say, when you port this project, Porting Assistant will do this following change. It'll replace system.web.mvc with Microsoft.ASP.NET Core MVC. So it'll start to tell you what it's actually doing. In some cases, it can't. So it'll say, this is an incompatible method invocation. You're using action result, and this is the NuGet packages you're referencing. And if I continue down, or depending on different projects or different class files, it's actually going to say, like, this doesn't exist, this is deprecated, whatever, right? And this, at this level, is really, really valuable because it shows me, for this particular class file, and that was boards controller, right? So in this particular class file, there's 20 incompatible APIs. And I can then get a pretty solid understanding from running this assessment tool what needs to happen to upgrade my app from .NET Framework, in this case 4.5, to 6. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to port this in front of you because it will not work. Yes, Mr. Ed.
5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes? You're not waving? You're not saying hi? That's lame. So let's actually go through a process of porting a project that actually I can actually show you right now. So who here is familiar with Nuonsoft.json? If you're not familiar with it, it is literally the package that's not owned by Microsoft for serializing and deserializing JSON, right? So the reason why I like using this is because it's a class library, so it's fairly contained. But it shows you that you can do this very, very quickly. So as you can see here, it's a .NET 4.5 project, and there's not a lot of incompatibilities, and there's a couple of incompatible API calls which I commented out earlier today. I can actually go in here and port it, and it'll ask, okay, so what is the target framework that you want, and where are you putting that? I can click that port. I actually ported this earlier today because this can take a few minutes. And actually, I'm going to go through the process of testing that. So I want to create a new project. And let's just do a console application, just because we want to be, I don't have much time left. So the framework for it is .NET 6. And this is going to create just the template console application, which is going to be like one line of code, which is still somewhat jarring when you first see it. There's been some good talks here, and so you'll be able to see them online as well about what's happened in that space. But anyway, so this is a console application, right? So what I want to be able to do is I want to reference that new project that I just ported. So I can go in here into Solution Explorer, and I can add an existing project. And I can specify, that's the location of that project that I ported. I'm going to specify this CS project file. And if I open this up, it's going to show me that it's a target framework .NET 6 class library. So I can go back into my program.cs, and I can do, let's zoom in a bit. So let's just do var, and let's just create a list. And that list is a new list of string, because this is going to be the silliest demo ever. And this string is going to be foo bar, right? Makes sense. So all I'm doing is I'm creating a new list of strings. And then what I want to be able to do as well is I want to take that list of strings, and I want to serialize it into JSON. So I'm going to go JSON convert. And then it's going to say, oh, you need to add a reference to Newton.statefilms. So I'll do that. Serialize my object, and then list. Right? And then what I'm going to do, just to show that it works, is I'm going to write line JSON. And then I'll just do a read line at the end because I don't want the console to close on me. So all this is going to do is it's going to just test that the serialization process works. So basically validate that this application, this project that was ported from .NET Framework 4.5 to .NET 6 still runs. So if I hit this green button, theoretically, hopefully what will happen magically is that a console window will pop up. It will write out a stringified version of that list of strings, which you can see here. It won't let me zoom in. There you go. So again, very, very simple demo, but it shows you what you have the capability to do with the right tools. Obviously, if you have an entire company that is dependent on this .NET application, you probably can't use these tools and port today and they'll magically work. However, what you do have the opportunity to do is use them for that assessment step, right? So, at the end of the day, I don't know what that was. Let's, from the current slide. I don't know why. Oh, must have checked a box. So yeah, so that is a short link. I know that I'm running short on time. If people ask me questions, I can chat with you up here really quick or go into the hallway there. But that's a short link to a lot of the stuff that I just showed. So it's got a link to this deck. It's got a link to the .NET Upgrade Assistant, the documentation for that, the porting system for .NET from AWS, some really, really helpful migration guides to go from certain project component types to .NET 6, and just some overall information as well. So my name is Isaac Levin. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed DevReach so far. If you have some questions, feel free to chat. If you want to follow me on Twitter, GitHub, whatever, or Twitch, it's Isaac R. Levin, and that is all I have to say about that. So thank you for your time.